What if I told you that something as simple and familiar as a sweet potato could quietly transform your health, and maybe even save your life? Sounds dramatic, maybe even unbelievable. But for Margaret Holloway, a retired schoolteacher from Asheville, North Carolina, it wasn't just food. It was hope on a plate. It all started with a hospital visit, one that came out of nowhere. Margaret had always been relatively healthy. She walked every morning, watched her salt intake, and even did Tai Chi in the park every Thursday with her friends. But one chilly November morning her vision blurred. Her hands trembled. Within hours she was in the ER, diagnosed with dangerously low blood pressure and vitamin deficiencies she never knew she had. Doctors said it was manageable. They adjusted her medication, gave her pamphlets, and told her to rest. But Margaret wasn't content with manageable. She wanted better. That's when her daughter Ellie, an ambitious nutritionist in her 30s, stepped in. Ellie began researching foods that not only nourished but actively healed. She wasn't looking for gimmicks. No superfood of the month, or exotic berries flown in from across the globe. She wanted something accessible, affordable, and proven by science. Her answer? Sweet potatoes. Yes, the same root vegetable we pile onto holiday plates and smother with marshmallows. But Ellie saw something else. Behind that rustic skin and soft, golden orange flesh was a nutritional powerhouse. And the more she dug, the more she found studies, reports, real cases, suggesting that sweet potatoes weren't just tasty. They were therapeutic. Margaret was skeptical. "I've eaten sweet potatoes my whole life," she said. "How could they suddenly be the magic bullet?" Ellie smiled. Not suddenly. Just finally understood. They started small. Roasted slices in olive oil. Creamy mash with cinnamon. Even morning smoothies with sweet potato puree. And day by day Margaret noticed changes. More energy. Better digestion. Improved sleep. Her blood pressure stabilized. Her vision stopped fluctuating. Her skin, once pale and dull, began to glow with renewed color. At her next doctor's visit, the staff did a double take. Her chart showed improvements across the board, from immune markers to blood sugar levels. "What did you do?" her physician asked, half joking. Margaret smiled. "Sweet potatoes." This is just the beginning of Margaret's journey, and the science behind it is nothing short of fascinating. Sweet potatoes aren't just comfort food. They're smart food, backed by real research, real benefits, and real transformations like Margaret's. Now let's take a deeper look at what makes this humble vegetable a silent warrior in the battle for better health. Margaret wasn't the only one stunned by the change. At her weekly book club, her friends started noticing too. "You look radiant," said Florence, her neighbor who rarely gave compliments. "What's your secret?" "A new cream." Margaret chuckled. "No cream. Just sweet potatoes." They laughed at first. But when Margaret shared her journey, the room grew quiet. Eyes widened. Questions poured in. "Can it help with blood sugar? What about digestion? My doctor keeps warning me about my cholesterol." That night, Margaret and Ellie sat at the kitchen table, sipping chamomile tea. "You know," Margaret said, "we should write this down. People need to know." And so they did. What started as a mother and daughter experiment turned into a ripple effect. But behind the anecdotes was something deeper: science. Cold hard data. Verified facts that supported every benefit they had witnessed firsthand. Sweet potatoes, especially the orange and purple varieties, are rich in vitamin A, essential for vision, immune support, and cell growth. The vibrant color isn't just for show. It's due to beta-carotene, a powerful antioxidant that the body converts into vitamin A. Then there's vitamin C, another critical nutrient, not just for immunity, but for wound healing, skin elasticity, and collagen production. Combine that with vitamin B6, which supports the nervous system and brain function, and suddenly you have a vegetable that acts more like a multivitamin. But vitamins were just the beginning. Margaret had struggled for years with constipation, something she was too embarrassed to talk about. But within weeks of incorporating sweet potatoes into her diet, that discomfort disappeared. The reason? Fiber. Sweet potatoes are loaded with it, both soluble and insoluble types. Soluble fiber slows digestion, helping regulate blood sugar and cholesterol. Insoluble fiber, meanwhile, adds bulk to stool, keeping the digestive system running smoothly. It wasn't just Margaret who noticed the change. Her friend George, a retired firefighter with a stubborn gut, gave them a try. I was skeptical, he admitted, but now I go like clockwork. Then there were the minerals, the silent supporters of health. Potassium, for instance, helps control blood pressure by balancing out the effects of sodium. And with many seniors unknowingly consuming too much salt, potassium-rich foods like sweet potatoes act as a counterweight, protecting the heart. Manganese, a trace mineral, supports bone health and metabolism, and even contributes to the body's antioxidant defenses. And while sweet potatoes don't have as much iron as meat, the non-heme iron they contain still plays a role in preventing anemia, especially when paired with vitamin C for better absorption. But what truly amazed Ellie was how much antioxidant power was packed into this humble root. Antioxidants fight oxidative stress, a silent threat that damages cells, proteins, and DNA over time, accelerating aging and increasing the risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and cancer. Orange sweet potatoes owe their color to beta-carotene, but the purple ones? They contain anthocyanins, powerful flavonoids linked to reduced inflammation and lower risk of disease. Ellie put it best. You're not just eating for energy, you're eating for defense. At Margaret's next doctor appointment, her blood work showed lower inflammation markers and improved immune function. Her doctor, once skeptical, took notes. I might just start eating sweet potatoes myself, he said with a wink. Let's pause here and reflect. This isn't a miracle cure. Sweet potatoes aren't magical, but what they are is a simple, reliable ally, backed by centuries of use and decades of research. They're affordable, easy to prepare, and packed with more nutrients than many processed supplements on the shelf. And most importantly, they work. Quietly, powerfully, consistently. Just ask Margaret. Winter turned to spring, and Margaret felt like she was aging in reverse. Her skin grew softer. Her joints ached less. And best of all, the brain fog that had haunted her for years finally began to lift. Mom, Ellie said one morning over breakfast, you're remembering names again. I know, Margaret whispered, amazed. I feel like I'm waking up. This wasn't a coincidence. Vitamin B6, found in abundance in sweet potatoes, plays a vital role in brain health. It helps create neurotransmitters, those little chemical messengers that keep our minds sharp, moods balanced, and memory strong. Paired with antioxidants like vitamin C and beta-carotene, the brain is better protected against the slow, invisible damage of oxidative stress. For older adults, that's no small matter. Cognitive decline, memory loss, confusion. It's something nearly every senior fears. But here was Margaret, now 73, recalling birthdays, solving crossword puzzles, even helping her granddaughter with homework. And then came the surprise visit. George, yes, the same George who joked about regularity, showed up with a bouquet of purple sweet potatoes in a brown paper bag. These are the ones I told you about, he said, handing them to Ellie. Purple flesh. They've got even more antioxidants. I read they help with inflammation too. Ellie smiled. George had been researching, and he was right. Purple sweet potatoes are rich in anthocyanins, potent compounds with anti-inflammatory properties. Chronic inflammation is the root cause of countless diseases. Arthritis, diabetes, even cancer. And while no food can eliminate inflammation entirely, sweet potatoes offer a gentle daily defense. Margaret's knees, once stiff and swollen, now allowed her to walk without pain. Her morning routine expanded from stretching to full walks through the neighborhood trails. And she wasn't alone. Florence, inspired by Margaret's transformation, began her own sweet potato experiment. Within 2 weeks, she reported improved energy and digestion. By the end of the month, her cholesterol levels dropped significantly. The stories multiplied. Neighbors, friends, even strangers from Ellie's online wellness group started sharing their own experiences. Sweet potatoes weren't just working, they were changing lives. But perhaps the most overlooked benefit of all? Heart health. Sweet potatoes are naturally low in saturated fat and cholesterol, two culprits in the rise of heart disease among seniors. But they also bring potassium, which regulates blood pressure and balances sodium levels. Combine that with fiber and antioxidants, and you have a food that supports arterial health, reduces plaque buildup, and promotes stronger circulation. Margaret's cardiologist, who'd once warned her of concerning patterns, now shook his head in disbelief. You've reversed your numbers, he said, flipping through her chart. I don't see this often. Not without a cabinet full of medications. Margaret just grinned. I have a cabinet full of sweet potatoes. As spring gave way to summer, the Holloway home became a hub of healing. Not through pills or gimmicks, but through shared meals, laughter, and a little orange root that had been waiting all along. Coming up next, we'll explore how sweet potatoes can help regulate blood sugar, improve eye health, and become a powerful ally for seniors with diabetes. But before we dive in, one truth remains. The most powerful medicine is often what we overlook. It was a humid afternoon in July when Margaret received a call that brought her to tears. It was from her younger brother, Thomas, a stubborn, fiercely independent man who rarely asked for help. He was 68, living alone in Charleston, and had recently been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. His voice on the line was softer than usual. Ellie told me about the sweet potatoes, he said. You think they could help me too? Margaret didn't hesitate. She drove 5 hours the next morning with a basket of meals and a heart full of hope. Thomas, like so many Americans, had been blindsided by the diagnosis. He had always assumed diabetes was about sugar. So he cut sweets, drank diet soda, and avoided fruit. But nothing seemed to help. His blood sugar still spiked. His energy crashed. His mood dipped. Ellie sat with him that evening and explained what Margaret had learned firsthand. Not all carbs are created equal. Sweet potatoes, despite being starchy, have a low glycemic index. That means they're digested slowly, causing a gradual rise in blood sugar, not a sudden spike. It's the opposite of white bread, rice, or sugary cereals that hit the bloodstream like a freight train. They also contain soluble fiber, which forms a gel-like substance in the gut, slowing the absorption of sugar. And their complex carbohydrates take longer to break down, providing sustained energy without the crash. Think of it like a gentle wave, Ellie said. Not a tsunami. Within 2 weeks of adding baked sweet potatoes to his dinners, Thomas saw changes. His morning blood sugar numbers dropped. He stopped waking up drenched in sweat. He even began sleeping through the night, a rare blessing for someone with diabetic neuropathy. And then one night, as the sun set over the marsh behind his house, he turned to Margaret and said, I feel like myself again. But the benefits didn't stop at blood sugar. Margaret, who had struggled with night vision for years, noticed she could now drive after dark without fear. The beta-carotene in sweet potatoes, converted by the body into vitamin A, was strengthening her retina, improving vision in low light. It wasn't magic. It was biology. Vitamin A is critical for eye health. A deficiency in it can lead to night blindness and dry, damaged eyes. Sweet potatoes, especially the bright orange kind, deliver more than enough to meet daily requirements. And when combined with vitamin C, they also help protect the blood vessels in the eyes, reducing the risk of cataracts. Thomas too began to see sharper. He was back to reading the newspaper without needing the brightest light in the house. In one of her video calls, Ellie beamed with pride. It's amazing what food can do, isn't it? But she also reminded them, portion control matters. 1 or 2 medium sweet potatoes per day is plenty, she said. And always pair them with protein or healthy fat to balance absorption. They listened. They adjusted. And the results kept coming. One evening, Margaret sat on the porch with Thomas, watching the fireflies flicker like little lanterns in the dark. You know, she said, all these years we were surrounded by healing and we never knew it. Thomas nodded. It was right under our feet. Coming up next. In the final stretch of our story, we'll explore how sweet potatoes can reduce inflammation, support mobility, and become a quiet force in preventing heart disease and even cancer, without a prescription or side effects. But remember, this isn't about chasing fads. It's about reconnecting with food that serves you from the inside out. By August, Margaret was walking farther than she had in years. The stiffness in her knees? Gone. The swelling in her ankles? Nearly invisible. She was moving not just with ease but with grace. I haven't felt this light in decades, she told Ellie one afternoon as they strolled through the farmer's market, sunflowers in hand and sweet potatoes in her tote. But something more profound was happening beneath the surface. Because every step Margaret took, every breath she inhaled, was now fueled by something her doctors had long struggled to treat: reduced inflammation. Chronic inflammation is a silent killer. It doesn't scream or shout. It whispers, quietly damaging cells, eroding joints, thickening arteries, and igniting conditions like arthritis, heart disease, and even cancer. And yet here she was, not cured but better, stronger. Much of it had to do with the antioxidants found in sweet potatoes. We've already met beta-carotene, the bright orange pigment and powerful free radical fighter. But sweet potatoes contain a spectrum of these defenders. In the purple variety, the hero is anthocyanin, a natural compound shown to reduce inflammatory responses at the cellular level. Ellie explained it simply one day as she chopped vegetables at the kitchen island. Inflammation is like a fire, she said. Antioxidants are the water. And Margaret's body was finally cooling down. George, their friend with the tough gut and tougher joints, called to share his own progress. I bent down to tie my shoes this morning, he said, laughing. Didn't even think about it. Even Florence, who'd suffered for years from aching wrists and a sore back, reported a full week without pain. Just feels easier to move, she said. Like I'm not carrying bricks inside my body. But inflammation was only part of the picture. What truly left Margaret speechless came from an article Ellie emailed late one night. The headline read, "Sweet Potatoes and Cancer. Promising Research on Natural Prevention." The article cited multiple studies showing that the antioxidants in sweet potatoes may play a role in preventing the development and progression of certain cancers. While not a cure, the compounds found in these roots could help protect DNA from oxidative damage, the kind that sets cancer in motion. One study focused on colon cancer, another on breast cancer. The findings were cautiously optimistic. No silver bullet, but a shield, natural, powerful, and available to everyone. Margaret read every word, her heart pounding. She remembered the friend she lost to colon cancer. The fear, the silence, the helplessness. And now here she was, holding a piece of armor she'd been eating all along. The final health chapter came when Margaret went in for her annual heart screening. She had been expecting the usual. Numbers slightly better, maybe a gentle pat on the back. Instead, the cardiologist stared at the monitor, brows furrowed. "Your arteries," he began, flipping through her chart. Margaret tensed. "They're cleaner," he said slowly. "Significantly less plaque than last year. Your cholesterol is down. Blood pressure steady. This is impressive." He paused. "Are you on something new?" Margaret grinned. "Only nature. Sweet potatoes are heart heroes in disguise. Low in cholesterol. Low in saturated fats. Rich in potassium, which regulates pressure. High in fiber, which binds to excess cholesterol and helps flush it from the body." The doctor nodded slowly. "Keep doing whatever you're doing." And she would. Because for Margaret, food had become medicine. Meals had become moments. And health had become freedom, not from aging but from decline. Now in her garden, surrounded by orange and purple vines, Margaret looked around at the quiet revolution that had begun with a single question. Could this really help? And the answer? Yes, it did. And it still does, for anyone willing to return to the roots of nourishment. Autumn came to Asheville like a painting. Trees turned gold. Air grew crisp. And the scent of roasted sweet potatoes filled Margaret Holloway's kitchen more often than not. By now, sweet potatoes weren't just a food in her home. They were a symbol of healing, of discovery, of starting over even when it feels too late. On a quiet Sunday morning, Margaret stood at her counter, gently mashing a fresh batch of sweet potatoes with cinnamon and a dash of nutmeg. As steam curled from the bowl, her granddaughter, Sophie, patted in barefoot, rubbing her eyes. "Granny," she yawned, "can I have some?" Margaret smiled and nodded. "Of course, sweet pea." She handed Sophie a small dish, just like her mother Ellie once did for her. And in that moment, 3 generations stood around a food so humble, yet so powerful, quietly nourishing bodies, gently fortifying futures. Because at the heart of it all, this wasn't a story about sweet potatoes. It was a story about awareness, about looking beyond labels, beyond quick fixes and trendy pills, and instead turning inward, toward nature, tradition, and science working in harmony. Ellie eventually turned Margaret's journey into a podcast. Rooted, she called it. A weekly show about healing through everyday foods. Margaret was her first guest, of course, and her episode became the most downloaded of the year. Thousands of listeners from Maine to California began experimenting with sweet potatoes. Some were recovering from surgeries. Others were battling diabetes. Many simply wanted to feel better, to reclaim something they thought was gone. And with every message Ellie received, every story of improved sleep, stable blood sugar, stronger steps, the same truth rang louder. Sometimes what you need is already in your kitchen. Margaret knew she hadn't discovered a cure, but she'd rediscovered something far more lasting. Choice. The choice to nourish. The choice to heal. The choice to age, not with fear but with wisdom, clarity, and strength. Now at 74, Margaret stood a little taller. She moved with purpose. She smiled more often. And every night before bed, she whispered a small, quiet prayer. Thank you for second chances. Final reflection for the viewer. Sweet potatoes aren't magic, but they are mighty. They deliver vitamins that strengthen your eyes, fiber that supports your gut, antioxidants that calm inflammation, potassium that guards your heart, and complex carbohydrates that stabilize your blood sugar. They are simple, affordable, and powerful. Whether roasted, mashed, baked, or blended, this one-root vegetable may be one of the most underappreciated allies in your journey to better health after 60. So next time you shop for groceries, stop by the root section. Look for the orange and purple hues. And remember, healing doesn't always come in a bottle. Sometimes it grows beneath your feet. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend. Pass it to a loved one. Or better yet, make someone a warm, delicious dish of sweet potatoes tonight. Because the greatest gift you can offer someone isn't advice. It's hope.